Let me tell you about a couple. See if this sounds familiar. She works in marketing, makes about $62,000 a year. He works in IT, pulls in around $71,000. Combined household income, $133,000. On paper, they're doing great. Top quarter of households, the kind of income that's supposed to feel comfortable, secure, even a little impressive. They should be building wealth, maxing out retirement accounts, taking vacations without checking their bank app first, feeling like adults who have things under control. Instead, it's Tuesday night, 9 o'clock. They're both on the couch, half awake, staring at their phones. Dinner was takeout again because neither of them had the energy to cook. The sink is full. The laundry is still in the dryer. No one has the willpower to deal with it. Their savings account has maybe 2 months of expenses. Maybe. Last month, the car needed repairs and it went straight onto a credit card. Not because they're reckless, because there wasn't another option. They both work full-time. Sometimes more than full-time. They leave early, come home late, and spend a few tired hours together before doing it all again the next day. Here's the strangest part. They did everything right. They got the degrees, they built careers, they got married, they combined finances, they bought a house in a good school district. They followed the script exactly the way it was written. So why does it still feel like they're drowning? Why does a household making 6 figures feel so fragile? If you've ever looked at your combined income and thought, we make too much money to feel this broke, then this story might hit closer to home than you expect. Because what if the problem isn't that you're bad with money? What if the problem is that the system quietly changed the rules while everyone was busy trying to keep up? And what if the very thing that was supposed to make families more secure is actually what made them more vulnerable? The two-income trap isn't really about whether two people should work. It's about how households build their lives around the income they have. For many families, the second paycheck was supposed to create security. More money coming in should mean more stability, more options, more peace of mind. But when expenses rise to match both incomes, that extra earning power can disappear into the background. What remains is a system that depends on everything continuing exactly as it is. And life rarely stays exactly as it is. The families who feel the most stable financially are not always the ones who earn the most. Often they are the ones who have preserved flexibility. They've avoided letting fixed costs expand to consume every dollar that comes in. They've left themselves room to adapt, to slow down, to handle unexpected changes without everything collapsing at once. This doesn't mean rejecting ambition or refusing to earn more. It means being intentional about how that income is used. It means recognizing that higher income alone doesn't automatically create security. Margin creates security. Options create security. The ability to adjust when life shifts creates security. If a household can structure its core expenses so they're sustainable even if one income changes, then the second income becomes a powerful tool instead of a fragile necessity. It becomes a way to build resilience rather than just maintain appearances. Because in the end, financial strength isn't just about the size of the paycheck. It's about how much room exists between income and obligation. It's about how quickly a family can adapt when circumstances change. And it's about making sure that the plan for the future doesn't depend on everything going perfectly forever. Once you see the trap, you can't unsee it. The question becomes what you choose to do differently. The phrase two-income trap wasn't invented by a YouTuber or a finance blogger. It came out of serious research. In the early 2000s, a Harvard law professor named Elizabeth Warren, along with her daughter Amelia Warren Tyagi, studied thousands of families who had filed for bankruptcy. They expected to find what most people assume: households that didn't earn enough money. What they found instead was unsettling. Many of the families going bankrupt weren't single-income households struggling on low wages. They were dual-income families, households where both adults were working, households that, on paper, looked stable, responsible, middle class. The assumption had always been that a second paycheck made a family safer. If one person lost their job, the other income could carry them. If an emergency happened, there would be more financial cushion, more resilience. But the research showed something different. Having two incomes didn't necessarily make families more secure. In many cases, it made them more fragile. Why? Because by the time both incomes were fully committed to the monthly bills, there was no margin left, no buffer, no spare capacity. If either partner lost a job, got sick, or needed to step away from work for any reason, the household didn't just lose extra income. It lost the income that everything depended on. In earlier decades, a single-income family had a hidden advantage. If the main earner lost their job, the stay-at-home partner could enter the workforce. It wasn't ideal, but it was a backup plan, a reserve that could be activated in a crisis. Today, in many households, that reserve has already been deployed. Both partners are already working. Both paychecks are already needed. The emergency plan has become the everyday plan. And that's where the trap begins to take shape. Not because families are irresponsible, not because they're making wild financial decisions, but because the structure of cost has expanded to match the expectation of two incomes. When everything is built around both paychecks, the household stops being flexible. It starts operating at full capacity all the time, like a machine running at maximum output with no room for error. Everything works until something doesn't. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind for a moment. Go back to around 1970. At that time, many middle-class families operated on a single primary income. Typically, one parent worked full-time while the other handled the household. That setup wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't universal, but financially it had one important feature: margin. A median single-income household could often afford a median-priced home. Housing typically consumed a smaller share of income than it does today. Public schools in many areas were reasonably funded regardless of neighborhood. Basic health care, a car, groceries, and the occasional vacation were within reach. Most importantly, there was a built-in backup plan. If the primary earner lost a job or became unable to work, the stay-at-home partner could enter the workforce. That second potential income acted like an insurance policy. It wasn't being used every day, but it existed. It was available if something went wrong. Fast forward to today, dual-income households have become the norm, not the exception. In many families with children, both parents work full-time. On paper, household income is higher than it was decades ago, even after adjusting for inflation. But costs have not stood still. Housing prices have risen dramatically relative to income. Healthcare spending per household has climbed for decades. Childcare, which wasn't a major line item for single-income families where one parent was at home, is now a significant expense for many households. Education costs, especially for college, have surged over time. In other words, while incomes rose, many of the core costs of middle-class life rose faster. The additional income that dual-income households brought in didn't simply create extra wealth, it was absorbed. Gradually, almost completely. And once those higher fixed costs became normal, the second income stopped feeling like a bonus. It started feeling like a requirement. What used to be a backup plan became the baseline. On paper, a dual-income household looks powerful. One person earns $70,000, the other earns $50,000. Together, that's $120,000. It feels like a lot. It feels like there should be plenty of room to get ahead. But let's slow down and follow that second income. Not in theory, in reality. Start with taxes. In a progressive tax system, additional income is often taxed at a higher marginal rate than the first portion of income. That means the second paycheck doesn't land in the bank at its full value. After federal taxes, state taxes, and payroll taxes, a significant portion is already gone before it ever reaches the household budget. Now add childcare. For households with children, this becomes one of the largest expenses tied directly to both parents working. Full-time daycare or after-school care can cost thousands per year per child. In many areas, it rivals a second mortgage. The second income isn't just bringing money in, it's also creating a new category of expenses that didn't exist when one parent was home. Then there's commuting. Two working adults often means two commutes. Gas, public transportation, vehicle maintenance, parking, and sometimes even a second car. These costs don't feel dramatic individually, but over a year they add up. The second income requires infrastructure to support it. There's also the less obvious category, convenient spending. When both adults are working long hours, time becomes scarce. Cooking from scratch, handling all home maintenance, running every errand personally, those things become harder. So households compensate. More takeout, more delivery, more services that save time but cost money. Again, nothing extreme, just small adjustments that accumulate. By the time you account for taxes, childcare, commuting, and the ripple effects of two demanding work schedules, the net contribution of that second income can shrink dramatically. Sometimes it still adds meaningful financial strength, but in many cases the margin is far thinner than the gross salary suggests. And here's where the psychological part of the trap appears. Even if the net gain from the second income is modest, the household makes decisions based on the gross number. Mortgage approvals are based on combined income. Car loans are based on combined income. Lifestyle expectations rise to match combined income. The household begins to build a life that assumes both paychecks will always be there. And once that happens, stepping back becomes almost impossible. The real danger of the two-income trap isn't just that the second income gets absorbed, it's that flexibility disappears. When a household structures its life around both paychecks, everything becomes dependent on both paychecks continuing without interruption. The mortgage is sized for two incomes. The car payments assume two incomes. Childcare, insurance, and daily expenses all assume that both people will keep working at the same pace year after year. As long as nothing goes wrong, it can function. The bills get paid. The schedule is tight but manageable. From the outside, it looks stable. But life rarely stays perfectly stable. Someone gets laid off. Someone gets sick. A parent needs care. A child needs extra support. Burnout hits. A career change becomes necessary. In a single-income household from decades ago, there was often a built-in adjustment mechanism. If the main earner lost their job, the other partner could enter the workforce. It wasn't ideal, but it provided a path forward. There was unused earning capacity waiting in reserve. In many modern dual-income households, that reserve is already in use. Both partners are already working at full capacity. There is no dormant second income waiting to be activated. It's already part of the monthly survival plan. So when one income disappears, even temporarily, the impact can be immediate and severe. Fixed costs don't shrink just because income does. The mortgage still expects its payment. Childcare still needs to be covered. Insurance premiums don't pause. The household can go from stable to strained very quickly. This is why the issue isn't really about how much a family earns. It's about how much room they have to adjust. How much margin exists between income and non-negotiable expenses. How easily the household can adapt if circumstances change. Two incomes can create the illusion of strength. But if both incomes are already fully committed, that strength is fragile. It works right up until the moment something interrupts the flow. And when that interruption comes, families often realize they weren't operating with extra security. They were operating at full capacity the entire time. So what can a household actually do about this? The answer isn't as simple as telling one person to quit their job or pretending the modern cost of living doesn't exist. For many families, two incomes are necessary. The system is built around it. Housing, childcare, and basic expenses often require both people to work. But there is a shift in mindset that changes how those two incomes function. Instead of treating both incomes as permanent and fully committed to fixed expenses, some households choose to build what you could call a one-income foundation. The idea is not that only one person works. The idea is that the household's non-negotiable costs are structured so they could, if necessary, be covered by a single income. That doesn't mean life would feel luxurious on one income. It might require adjustments, fewer extras, a simpler lifestyle. But the core obligations, housing, essential bills, basic living costs, would still be manageable. The second income then becomes something different. Instead of being required just to keep the system running, it becomes a tool. a buffer, a way to build savings, invest for the future, and reduce debt. Over time, it starts to create margin rather than just sustaining the status quo. This approach often requires trade-offs. It might mean choosing a home that fits comfortably within one income rather than stretching to the maximum a bank will approve. It might mean delaying certain upgrades. It might mean resisting the pressure to match the lifestyle of other dual-income households. But the payoff is flexibility. If one person needs to step back from work temporarily, the household can absorb the shock. If a career change becomes necessary, it's possible without immediate crisis. If an unexpected expense hits, there's breathing room. Over time, the savings and investments built from that second income can begin to generate their own support. Not overnight, but gradually. The goal isn't to eliminate the second income, it's to stop depending on it for survival. So, what can a household actually do about this? The answer isn't as simple as telling one person to quit their job or pretending the modern cost of living doesn't exist. For many families, two incomes are necessary. The system is built around it. Housing, childcare, and basic expenses often require both people to work. But there is a shift in mindset that changes how those two incomes function. Instead of treating both incomes as permanent and fully committed to fixed expenses, some households choose to build what you could call a one-income foundation. The idea is not that only one person works. The idea is that the household's non-negotiable costs are structured so they could, if necessary, be covered by a single income. That doesn't mean life would feel luxurious on one income. It might require adjustments, fewer extras, a simpler lifestyle. But the core obligations, housing, essential bills, basic living costs, would still be manageable. The second income then becomes something different. Instead of being required just to keep the system running, it becomes a tool, a buffer, a way to build savings, invest for the future, and reduce debt. Over time, it starts to create margin rather than just sustaining the status quo. This approach often requires trade-offs. It might mean choosing a home that fits comfortably within one income rather than stretching to the maximum a bank will approve. It might mean delaying certain upgrades. It might mean resisting the pressure to match the lifestyle of other dual-income households. But the payoff is flexibility. If one person needs to step back from work temporarily, the household can absorb the shock. If a career change becomes necessary, it's possible without immediate crisis. If an unexpected expense hits, there's breathing room. Over time, the savings and investments built from that second income can begin to generate their own support. Not overnight, but gradually. The goal isn't to eliminate the second income, it's to stop depending on it for survival.